This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is the January 23rd, 2018 edition, show 303, maybe? I'm going to go with 303. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you as the voice of the Kentucky Derby. Travis Stone said there up top with his lovely new voiceover recorded over the strains of Willie Niles' Dear Lord. And I am joined, as Travis indicated, by the People's Champ. He's back on the planet Texas. He's Jonathan Kinchin. JK, how are you today?
I'm good. Speaking of Travis Stone, double checking the Twitter machine, I believe today is his birthday.
It is. It is his birthday. I did see that. Nick Tamaro, friend of the podcast, sent out a nice note. If you see Travis online or in person, wish him a happy birthday. Buy him a birthday beer. I don't know. I think he just turned 29 or something. I'm not sure about that though. I don't know if race callers, is it like actresses? Do they publish their true ages? But yes, happy birthday to Travis for sure. And thanks once again for his contributions to the new theme to the show. We normally on our Tuesday show do some recapping of the previous weekend's racing. I'll be honest, I wasn't super plugged in last weekend. I did a little bit of handicapping on Sunday. I wrote one of those how I'm playing pieces for DRF.com. And then, of course, the horse I built the whole thing around scratched. So you know how that goes. Lots of fun. I know, JK, you at the very least had done a piece about a pick 3, I think it was, for Out of the Gate. How did that turn out? Have you turned your luck around on that show, or do you save all your luck for the DRF Players Podcast audience?
I was more lucky on the pod this week. My pick 3, I got a pick 3 at Tampa, where I went 2x2 by single. For all intensive purposes, it was a complete failure. The two that I used in the first ran 1-2, but they were short price horses, so that wasn't anything really cute about that.
You don't get to count that.
In the second race, I used 2 horses, and one of them ran second to an 88-1 shot that wired the field.
That's a tough
moral victory. And my single
moral victories in horse playing. You either cash or you don't cash.
I know, and my single ran second. So the Out of the Gate pick 3 was a fail. But I thought we did okay leading people and generally in some good directions with the pick 4. We didn't give a pick 4 ticket. We gave pick 4 horses that were interesting, and we had 2 top picks that I think both of them paid about $11 and one Conquest Tsunami down the hill, and also the horse Tina Bud, I think, or Tina something.
Yes.
Who
your clear top choice. We talked about a few horses in that race, but you made it very clear that would be the one to press, and that horse paid surprisingly well.
Yeah, I think it's one of those kind of stranger danger deals where she was a shipper, and so I think maybe there might have been some hesitation there. And I usually feel good about situations like that, right? Where we can lead people into some directions where if someone hit the pick 4 because they included Conquest Tsunami because we mentioned him, I feel good about those situations. And I actually, those are my comfort zone. I enjoy my Out of the Gate segments, but it's hard, right? Because I got 3 minutes to talk about one bet, and I'm sure there's someone who hates me that has how bad my ROI is in that situation, but it's tough. It's a tough situation.
I don't know. I'm not sure if you've quite reached Andy Serling levels yet, JK, where you have a whole legion of trolls on Twitter who do nothing but track your picks to make fun of you during the cold streaks. But it's something to aspire to, perhaps.
But one of the things that we've talked about off air and even maybe a few times on, and I know Matt shares the same sentiment, and I believe Dan does as well, Illman, is that and Andy Serling is where I actually heard this phrase from before I even started doing stuff like this, where I was giving out thoughts and ideas. My goal when we have these conversations is obviously to lead you financially in the right direction if I can. But more importantly, I just want to, as a horse player, and I want other horse players to do the same to me, is I want to share my thought process so that I can make you a better player. And then I always look for you all, being the listeners and friends, to share their thought process to make me a better player. It's just an exchange to me. It doesn't always necessarily have to lead to a score tomorrow, but it's still beneficial if it can lead to a score next week.
It's a little bit like, and we see this in our questions sometimes that people ask us, there's the idea of just like giving someone a play, right? Then there's the idea of talking about a race in a way you're going to learn something. It's almost like, and this is perhaps a highfalutin analogy, but the idea that you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Is there a little bit of that going on here with what you're talking about, Jonathan?
Yeah, the 100%, right? No, you're right. That is a little bit.
You know what I'm saying, though. I mean, I think there's something to it. The idea that, like, when we're talking about racing, not that we're so experts that you're going to listen to us and become a professional player. It's way, way, way too hard for that. But the idea that you're going to, get some piece of knowledge that's going to help you more than just in the race, it's not interesting. And honestly, frankly, if we were good enough to just like, okay, we're just going to give you these tickets and they're going to produce a plus ROI. If the game were that easy and we were that good at it, I don't think we'd be here. We'd be on an island.
Right. Yeah, of course. And then the other thing is, like, I'm thinking about like a race like the Breeders' Cup Sprint, which is really weird, right? And then I'm thinking back to that. I thought I thought Dre Fong was not going to run well. However, I thought that 4 horses presented a lot of value and could really, be an opportunity to make some money. So when I have to make a selection, I have to pick one of those 4 horses as my selection, when in reality it's really 4 of them. So what I usually do in those situations is I pick the one that if I don't have a strong lean, I pick the one with the most interesting story and the best handicapping nugget that I can share, and it's more interesting to talk about, right? It's like because at that point I'm just splitting hairs. So why give you Imperial Hint, who's going to be the shortest of the 4 horses that I like, when I can give you Ransom the Moon, who I can give you the angle that he's actually better going 6 than going longer, and that he was on a dead rail, and he galloped out huge after he finally, that's a better story than Imperial Hint's really fast and he's going to be 4-1, So it's an interesting position for us, and it's a fun position, and I'm not complaining at all. I'm just saying it's there's more to it than just like, oh, here's my winner.
No, it's nice to be able to talk it through, and that's one of the things that we get to do. And here, when we can talk about a race, a Breeders' Cup race, some of those races we talked about for 10 minutes, and you can get into some of those nuances instead of just going bang, bang. Speaking of handicapping concepts to discuss, you mentioned one in passing that actually I've found to be a profitable angle over the years. Andy Serling might be one of the first people I heard talk about it. And it's that idea of being attracted to the stranger. Explain what that means and why you think it's a good angle sometimes.
Well, we've actually talked about this and like on the opposite side of the equation before. Is like when you see a race where there is you see a race in the PPs where 3 horses that are in the race today faced each other last time. That gives people a sense of confidence. It gives them something to form an opinion on. And when you have a horse who shows up from Parks running at Aqueduct or Tampa running at Gulfstream, and he hasn't been in that condition, he hasn't been bumping heads with those horses that show up today, there's that stranger danger feel, right? Or it's a horse that was claimed from Golden Gate and then shows up down here running on the dirt for the first time. Or a horse that was claimed at Churchill and is brought to Del Mar for the ship and win when you have those situations, those horses are often overlooked. However, there is times where they're overbet, but they're typically overlooked, and you can usually get a little bit of a better value on them because there's a lot more unknowns for the public when they're engaging in those situations.
And that's where the stranger danger idea comes in. It's people are more attracted to. They want to find there were 3 horses coming out of the same race, and one of them had a trip. They're going to be more attracted to that than this horse that they don't, have a trip note on or don't know as well. And yes, sometimes those strangers, when the strangers come from like fashionable barns, somebody's at my door, wonderful. When the strangers come from fashionable barns, there are opportunities where they can be overbet. But like you said, very often they're overlooked. JK, talk for about 45 seconds. I'm going to go.
Yeah. No, of course. I think Muggs is probably sharing the same ideas that, and I'm going to make this point, and then you're going to be gone, and you're not going to know what I said, but I'll just reiterate it. But it's like going to go get something to eat, and there's 4 restaurants next to each other. There's a Chili's, a Fridays, a California Pizza Kitchen, and some one-off. Like, there's certain people that their dinner personality is going to lead them to the one-off. Then there's a lot of people, their betting personality is going to lead them to Chili's because they know they can get the chicken sandwich and ask for the French fries to be burnt. It doesn't mean that one-off isn't a better opportunity. It's just, and if you go to the one-off, you'll probably be, and it's good, you'll probably be rewarded. So I think it's kind of a comparison. It's like people just, if it's a stranger danger, some no-name trainer from Parks shows up at Aqueduct, and Todd has a horse in, and Gary Contessa has a horse in, and Charlie Baker has a horse in, people are going to lean to those 3 guys because they know them. There's a sense of comfort there. And so I think opportunities can be had for the no-name guy from Parks.
That's excellent. I only caught the end of that, and after hearing the Chili's piece of the analogy, I'll have to go back and listen to the whole thing. But I think we're on the same page there for sure. We got a bunch of questions. I put out just sometimes when we're running like maybe 5 minutes short, I'll put out a call for questions on the old Twitter machine there at Looms Boldly, me at UT Big Hair him. And we got basically a whole show's worth of questions, even if I can't read the POTUS Capper one on air and keep my job. But we got some really good ones, and I want to make sure we get to those. I also want to leave some time later in the show to talk a little bit about the Pegasus. We'll obviously be diving in full to talk about the Pegasus on Friday's show. I mean, heck, it might be the whole show on Friday. It's shaping up to be such an interesting race. I know you're traveling to Florida. Are you? You'll be available to do Friday's show at the normally scheduled time, JK?
Yeah, I'm going tonight or tomorrow. I didn't thought about it. Friday Gulfstream starts at, I don't know what time they start. I'll look at it. I'm playing in the contest, so unless I have to bet the first race or whatever, there shouldn't be any need for an adjustment. But I could also do it from the track too, the show. So
yeah, 11 to 12. You think their first post is going to be before 12?
No, I don't believe so. But time, the time things throw me off. And
yeah, I mean, if the first race is scheduled for 12, you've got until at least 12:10 anyway. So that's you should be good to wrap and rock and roll in any case. So that's big news. You are competing in the Pegasus betting challenge. Are you going to go double barreled?
I believe so. Double barreled. Can't wait to dive into this stakes laced card on Friday. There's sarcasm there.
I was going to say, I was going to say I haven't seen the draw or anything, but I did look in the condition book, and there are many, many reasons to play in the Pegasus World Cup betting challenge. Many, many reasons, not the least of which is, the whole purse being added, the bankroll all acts is live. You're going to get rebates on your action throughout the weekend. The quality of Friday's racing, I'm not sure that would make the top 11.
No, but you know what? Saturday will be fine, and the world is full of maiden claimers and 6-5 claimers and starter allowances, and so I think that I'm looking forward to having the advantage of bankroll preservation on Friday. I fancy myself a player that can do that, and so I'll try to preserve on Friday until the good stuff starts on Saturday. So. Obviously they can't all be the Breeders' Cup with 2 wonderful days of racing or Derby day or Derby weekend with the Oaks and the Derby. But look, they loaded up the card Saturday. I'd imagine the racing will be significantly improved come Saturday. So we'll just deal with what we got on Friday.
A theoretical question about handicapping contests before we get into the listener contest. In a situation like this, where you have a kind of a disparity between your Friday card and your Saturday card, some people think that rather than having specific minimums on Friday, that a contest should just have minimum amounts you have to bet the whole tournament. So in other words, you might be able to essentially like sit out Friday, just meaning then, hey, you're going to have to bet twice as much or close to it on Saturday. Is that fair? What's your thought on that line of thinking?
I'm cool with that. However, there is a part of me that loves the phrase, it's 2 words. It shows up in a lot of these contests, which is betting the challenge. So I kind of like the fact that it's a challenge to have to bet the card on Friday. And so I'm cool with it. Like, it's hard to get me too ruffled about those types of situations. Like, I'd be fine either way. Like, here's the thing is, if they told me I didn't have to bet until Saturday, I'd still probably bet 3 races on Friday. So why not make everyone else do it too, that they don't want to do it and I don't care doing it, right? So it's almost like an advantage to me. There's going to be 3 spots that I can find on Friday.
I prefer having mandatories that, even if there's a disparity in the quality of cards, I prefer the way they're doing it at Gulfstream, having actual mandatory bets you have to make. To me, that's like just what makes it a contest. And even if you're going to sort of Dutch your way through your minimums or make show bets or whatever, you've still got to execute. And I agree. It's right there in the name, betting challenge. Dave Gutfreund, in the Winning Contest Player, said it best when he talked about how he's not too worried about what the rules are as long as the rules are the same for everybody playing. That importance of having a level playing field. And where you get into trouble, and I'm not naming any names of any contest, but is where you have one set of rules that 95% of the people are playing by, and then another set of rules that 5% of the people are playing by. That's where you get egregiously unfair situations that players need to be aware of.
You're not sucking me in. You already hung up on me once today.
Hey, well, I didn't hang up on you. It was raining. The microphone wasn't working. You know, plus I had a podcast to listen to, but not this one. All right. While we're talking about the Pegasus, interesting wrinkle for those of you playing, and this should probably be confirmed. I haven't confirmed it yet with the tournament director, but you have to make, in addition to your normal minimum bets, you have to make a $3,000 wager in the Pegasus itself. And the way that I'm reading the rules, the way the rules are written, and they seem pretty clear, if you don't make that $3,000 bet, you're out. So that's a little bit different than most contests. I've never seen a contest before where you needed to have a certain amount on your bankroll heading into the last race to be eligible to participate in the prize pool. What do you think of that rule, JK?
It's kind of cool, right? Because we talked about it. It's like it prevents someone who's got $2,500 from betting $2,500 to win on War Story when he's 12-1, and they just did it because he's 12-1, and the horse wins, and then they're the smartest human being in the room. So that's cool. I have no problem with it. What's funny is we talked about it earlier today, and so what happens if it's Saturday? You have to bet 5 races. It's the middle of the day. You've bet 4 races, and you have the minimums are $500 each. You have $400. You bet $400 in that middle of the day race, and you hit it. You still have to bet another $500 race, right? Does your all-in $400 count as a minimum? I don't believe it does, right?
I wouldn't think so. No.
But it does. But it does in the last race.
No, it doesn't. You have to bet the 3,000.
No. I'm talking about in a separate situation. Say we're at Santa Anita. We're hanging out in the Eddie Logan. It's a one-day tournament. You have to, in a normal tournament, if you can't get yourself, let's say the minimum is 500. If you haven't made your minimums and you don't have 500 to bet in the last race, you'd be DQ'd for not making your minimums. Oh, well, then what do we even, this is the same rule. I get, maybe it's just a little different because 3,000 is a very different number than what the regular minimums are 1,000. And what's different about this is that you have to bet 3,000 3 times that minimum in the Pegasus. I think that makes it different and worthy of discussion. You're right. Yes, you're right. You're right. That is the difference. But virtually, it's the same thing.
It's right.
Outside of that,
rooted in. Yeah, it's rooted in what is normally done. It's just a little different. And there's a strategic reason for it to be a little different because of the way that the money bet in the Pegasus is treated differently because of the structure of the contest, Joe. Isn't that right?
Yeah, from what I understand, and I haven't followed it as much this year as I did last year, so if there's a rule change I missed, from what I understand, when you buy that slot, there is a sense of ownership of the handle for the Pegasus race itself, from what I understand. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So I think that making the handle go up for the race itself is beneficial to the slot owners who put up the $1 million, or Stronach who put up the whatever he put up.
All right, have you seen this? This one I'm just going to chalk up to madness. Talk about extending the run-up, like to the point of changing the distance of the Pegasus, because now all of a sudden, in the second year of the race, after running how many races at 1.1 miles at Gulfstream over the years, there's some thought afoot that it's unfair to the horses in the outside post, so they want to de facto make the race longer while still calling it 1 mile. And still calling it 1 mile. It makes my it's so racing. It just makes my brain hurt. But have you heard about what I'm talking about?
You know who else's brain's hurting is California Chrome. He's like, well, what about me last year? Not that he was winning that race in any situation, but
I was going to say you could draw him 1 through 12, and I don't think he was beating the winner. But point taken. I mean, you had your 4 to 5 favorite on the outside. You'd think if it was ever going to come up, it would have come up then.
Yeah, let's leave it alone and let's just run the race.
Yeah, I mean, it's like now you're worried about it. I mean, I don't know, make the race longer before you put forth what the parameters are that people are paying this money for, or not. I mean, it just seems like the kind of half measure that is just not even remotely a good idea for anybody.
It's insulting because it's like what? So it's not good enough for every other 1.1 mile race that we bet. But since we're giving $12 million, now we have to. Now we're going to be fair. Like I don't like it.
It's not good. I mean, that said, I'm happy to downgrade horses who are drawn out there, but it's just part of the equation. And those of us who've been betting these races over the years, like you sort of factor that in.
Yeah, and if I was Luch Racing and forgive me for forgetting the gentleman who actually owns the horse, but Sharp, I don't want him going 50 yards farther than 1.1 mile.
Right. No, that's totally.
You know, I want him to go 1 mile and 15 sixteenths. You know, or that's not good math, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, you know, I'm following.
4 sixteenths. No,
that's a quarter.
You know what I'm saying. You know where I'm going.
What you're saying is you don't want the race to be any longer than it has to be, and the idea of after deals are brokered and partnerships put together to change the distance. I mean, it's just the distance of the race is too fundamental. It's already disgraceful what we see certain tracks do in terms of their run up, where you're running races at 1 mile and calling them 7.5 furlongs on the Gulfstream turf, and now you're talking about doing that in the biggest money race. Anyway, hopefully this idea was just floated and will be quickly and swiftly buried because it's not a good idea.
Is it 3:30 seconds? Where 3 is that the fraction I'm looking for? 3:30.
What are you trying to say? I just thought you were trying to go with anything under an eighth.
Yeah, it's 3:30. It's 3:30 seconds under an eighth.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it?
Where is Eric Bialik when you need him?
He's moving. Has he moved yet? I know. I was surprised to hear he was moving his top.
He is. He's in Minnesota. But did you know he's coming to the Pegasus?
No. Oh man, it's going to be so fun. I wish I could make it down. I had original travel plans to go. A few things went haywire. I've got my brother's birthday this weekend, which I always miss. You know, every year this weekend was the NHC. So my brother, you know, he's typically has a birthday party And since I started working for DRF, I've missed it. I have the opportunity to go this year. There's no pressing work reason for me to go to the Pegasus. It would just be fun. So I can check out my brother's birthday party, which is going to be awesome. And I also have the fact that when I go, the NHC itself has now moved. I'm going to be heading out there to Vegas on the Tuesday of that week. Going to do some fun stuff. I've been chatting with my friend who's part of VSIN, Vegas Sports and Information Network, Gil Alexander, who does a numbers game 5 days a week. Awesome radio show about sports and specifically betting on sports. He wants to have Mike Maloney and I as guests on Wednesday. So I'm going to have to get out to Vegas early. And then I'm going to go right from Vegas. My personal driver, JK, Leo, the great Leo Mukvanovich, is going to be driving back to LA. I'm going to go with him, send for the family. They'll come out and meet me. Basically, I'm going to be on the road for more than 2 full weeks in February. It just didn't make sense for me to make the trip. But as you know, Doogie from Saratoga hit me up with text last night. Oh, when are we hanging out this weekend? Had to break the news I'm not making it. And now the great Eric Bilik's going to be there. I'm definitely feeling like I'm going to miss out.
You are. You're definitely going to miss out. But we're not going to have one for you. We're going to punish you for not coming.
We did have a question, and I think we'll answer it. It was asked in a very cheeky way, but it was a question about, is it a good idea for a horse player to spend money, as much as $100 for entrance fee or, on up from there for accommodations, to go to a high-profile event, or is a player better off just saving that money for a more advantageous wagering situation? For example, the potential for the Pick 6, Rainbow Six carryover on Sunday, the one day you'll see me playing that bet, is the day when the money's being given away. I have an opinion on this. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, some of us are fans, some of us are professionals, some of us are semi-professionals, some of us are weekend warriors. Be what you are. And if you're a guy that has $100 and you want to enjoy the festivities, then play, save your $100 and bet the Pegasus, and bet your opinion there. If you happen to like Gun Runner, then maybe look at playing the double with the race before, the Pick 3, or even the Pick 4. But if you only have $100, I think it's probably not the best use of money to find yourself in a pool with an extremely high degree of difficulty. You want to be involved. In my opinion, even when I was betting $50 a day or $200 a month or whatever it was, I wanted to be alive and I wanted to have action in whatever that big race was. I wanted to have a rooting interest when they turned for home. So if I was you with your $100, I would try to put it the best place possible where you can be alive in the race that you're excited about watching.
That's a good answer. I was actually taking the question to mean that it was even cheekier about the admission price for an event like the Pegasus. And to that, I was just going to say, piggybacking off your comment, JK, a lot of it's just going to come down to what your budget is. But I think as a racing fan, but even as somebody who's trying to improve as a horse player, to budget a certain amount of money to have experiences isn't crazy at all. Like, part of being a successful player, it's a really underrated part of becoming a successful player. And I've heard Richard Munchkin talk about this on the Gambling with an Edge podcast, which I also had the pleasure of being on last week with Mike Maloney. Did you see that on Twitter that we did that show? I
did.
Have you had a chance to check it out yet?
It's on my airplane download list.
I like it. It was fun. We definitely go into the weeds a little bit about some of the negative things about racing, but I think we pull it back with plenty of positives as well, and I think there's some good material in there. But something that Richard often says about advantage play specifically is that your network is hugely important in terms of hearing about opportunities. I think he's talking about as an advantage player, but really also learning techniques and just, the people you hang out with at the track, as we've talked about, Jonathan, can really go a long way into determining your success or failure. I truly believe that. If you're hanging out with people who are just, kind of like loose and negative, that's not going to be, you're not going to become as good a player hanging out with that lot as you are hanging out with people who take this a little bit more seriously and have a little bit more of equanimity when it comes to their betting. It's just some of it comes down to just like the vibes, but a lot of it's also just like it's very easy to imitate the behavior that you see and are around every day at the track. I bring this up because I feel like the Pegasus, like Equestricon, or like the biggest meets, Keeneland, Saratoga, these are opportunities to go and meet interesting people of a like mind that might help your play in general. So no, I do not have a problem with, I mean, I know it's a lot of money, and look, if you're, like you said, JK, if it's more in your betting personality, especially if you're more of a lone wolf type, by all means, stay home, bet the 100 on whatever you think the best opportunity is. But I don't think it's crazy at all for a player to go out of his or her way to attend an event where there's going to be some genuine excitement and good vibes and an opportunity to meet and schmooze other horse players. I assume you, as a contest player who's made so many friends in the game through contests, would agree with that idea.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, you just got to find your comfort zone, but I would never discourage someone from participating when they have the financial means to do so. If you can lose the 100, then play, enjoy, have fun. You learn, I've learned, you can learn a lot from doing research and development, but the best way to learn is to do, and to have real consequences and to have real, real emotion and impact. Obviously, like I said, you don't want to go outside your means, but you can pretend to bet $100 all the time. It will teach you something, but it won't teach you the lessons when there's actual $100 being won or lost.
I think that's right. I mean, it's interesting. Part of that's betting personality. Mike Maloney talks in Betting with an Edge about playing on paper, and that really did shape him and improve him as a horse player. But I think for most of us, it is true that having some consequence, having real consequence, is going to accelerate the learning curve. And I'd argue that same point, that hanging out with the right people you're rooting for, and you can learn a lot vicariously through one of your friends at the track. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, watching. I love watching other players do. I learned a ton when Nick Tamero and I's friendship was actually created. Watching him operate at the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge when he got fourth, I believe, that year. I think he was fourth. So
yes,
obviously sitting around watching Paul and Duke Matisse and Mike Maloney play and Sean Borman has always been something that I like to pick up little pieces here and there from those guys. So yeah, I think just involving yourself with it, being involved and asking questions and are all things that are beneficial.
We had some very specific questions about betting strategy on the Pegasus card. I say we put a pin in those till we've handicapped the races and can really talk about it on Friday. Hopefully, JK, you won't mind giving away too much on your thoughts, but I think if you're vague enough, we can probably do that. We had one question about verticals, another that I think was more related to horizontals. We'll tackle that on Friday. We're going to definitely do some serious handicapping then. Question from friend of the show, Brad, and he'd asked this one before, and I'd forgotten to get to it. Sometimes they just get buried. Never feel bad about asking me a question twice, because I probably didn't reject the question. I probably just misplaced it. And that is the case with Brad's question, which is, can you guys discuss how you evaluate if a horse on the Derby trail is likely to want more distance or will prefer shorter? JK, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that and not to give him two shout-outs on one show, but credit where credit's due, Nick Tamero always pointed out, or has pointed out to me, when horses in these mile and the 16th, mile and an 8th races range up and at some point in the race look like winners and then they retreat, those are horses that you want to look at cutting back. And two horses that he nabbed as horses that that he thought were like that were Frosted, Mohayman, who just never really trained on, so I won't hold that against him, and Practical Joke, who are horses that range and then kind of retreat. That's one of the things you can look for when you're looking for cutbacks. When you're looking for horses that are going to go on with it, one of my favorite things is obviously gallop outs. I'd like to see a horse passing horses in the gallop out, but it's not a not a definite indicator because maybe they ran so hard during the race that the gallop out wasn't possible. The other thing is more of like an even type of run, just where they're just kind of clicking off 12s and maybe a sub 12 in the mix there. Those are other things that I think will kind of show you that a horse has the potential to kind of carry on and to continue on. So those are some of the things I look for. I try not to get overexcited about the mile and the 16th races. I wait for performances at the mile and an 8th to be a real indicator of how they'll transition into that mile and a quarter.
I love all that. I'll add two things that are related but a little different. One super duper obvious one. I mean, like almost too obvious to say, but it needs to be said. Breeding. You can get a sense from looking at what a sire's progeny typically do, what the siblings typically do. A lot of that information is going to be available through DRF Formulator. You also have some of those very cool reports that you can access with DRF Plus about that there are sire reports in there that have a ton of cool data they're a good way to keep up, especially on younger sires before you get like a ton of data. Obviously, it's not always foolproof. You'll see horses who you would think, based on their breeding, wouldn't want to stretch out. They can still go ahead and get classic USA distances, but it's certainly a way to get clues. And the other thing, I'd look specifically at pace figures. It's a little tricky with Timeform because Timeform doesn't give you an exact late pace figure for each and every run. But Craig Milkowski has, in the Timeform US blog, given you a formula for where you can compute that yourself. There are rumors that eventually an LP number will be included in the PPs. That's something I'm really excited about. And then, of course, you always have in Timeform US the in the preview page, you get that LP snapshot. And again, I feel like those horses who are either who have their early and late number a little more similar to one another, or where the late number is faster, typically, not always, but typically that can be a clue that those horses are going to go further. Obviously, now that I mentioned it, I feel like I should say something. There was this terrible problem over at Timeform US over the weekend, JK. I don't know if you were playing actively enough to notice that the site had gone down, but I'm hearing that help is on the way, and hopefully just going to be a very temporary blip, because I know, as great as it is to have the Timeform information in Formulator, obviously some folks rely on that site, and I know it's being taken very seriously as an issue and should be back up and running soon. Did that affect you? Have you heard anything about it?
It didn't. I was running around, so I will say this
ahead of time too.
I will say that, yeah, of course. I will say this is that, like, I'm fine with tech mistakes. Obviously we're all kind of doing and carrying on and trying to grow our systems and what we're all, increase kind of the technology in racing. I'm okay with hiccups like this when they happen occasionally, and then they fix them. And Timeform typically has not been a site that has tech issues. So I'll give them a pass, and I trust that the team will get it organized. I think that it's frustrating when it comes to technology when things continue to fail over and over and over again. So I have a little bit more patience than some might have with situations like that.
Fair enough. A couple of rapid fire ones. Do we have any thoughts or ideas on what the 2019 Breeders' Cup host venue might be? I have no clue. I just worry about it when it gets announced. But do you have any inside information or a prediction, JK, on that one?
No, I mean, I think that what happened at Keeneland, we'll eventually see Keeneland get another one. If they're going to announce 3, I think there's probably a chance that Keeneland gets one of those 3. I don't think it will be 2019.
They go back that soon. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, they went in 15, right? So, if you my bad. If they went in 15, if they announce 20, that's a 5-year break. I mean, that's significant enough, I would guess. So, I guess maybe Keeneland would be an option. And then Santa Anita is probably the leader in the clubhouse, right? They haven't been to Santa Anita in a few. I guess it would have been 3 years at that point. I know they love Santa Anita for all the reasons that with seating and then the city obviously can support it, and it's really the distances are great. The Europeans like the firm turf, the weather. the down the hill race. It's probably just me talking about that, but so I think that would be cool. Obviously, I'd love to see one in Belmont at some point, but I guess always the weather is a concern. But
I don't think it's weather. I think there's politics. Whatever. I don't know the whole scenario, but obviously there's between all the craziness in New York racing and the Breeders' Cup, there's some sort of situation where détente would need to be achieved. It sure seems like to me. I mean, you can. I mean, I'm sure the weather at Monmouth in 2007 didn't help people thinking about the Northeast or whatever. But I mean, I think as one of the real seats of power in the sport, even if you have to wrangle it to have it a week early or something, it's fairly disgraceful that we haven't been able to get it back into this part of the country. And hopefully at some point that will be taken care of. Though I wouldn't hold my breath. I think your Santa Anita for 19 idea sounds the smart.
I wouldn't be shocked if there was a Laurel at some point, because I know that they've been doing a lot to try to get that. They've had improvements to the property. They've been kind of pushing for it. Stronach's involvement in the game obviously gets some recognition, and I would think that there's a possibility that Laurel could happen at some point. I would imagine they'd be in the same weather boat, but they might not stand to deal with the politics like you mentioned.
Hey, if there can be a World Cup in Qatar, I suppose there can be a Breeders' Cup at Laurel. Here's one from Nathan. Do we know anyone who makes figures for Japanese racing? I do not. Do we know anybody who does in our circle, JK?
I don't know anyone who does. I know some people who make figures for some kind of obscure places that you wouldn't think they did, but not Japan.
I wouldn't think it would be. I wouldn't think it would be too hard to do, though. I mean, I think I don't know exactly what information is free that the JRA releases, but Nathan, that might be a good area for you to investigate. I would think that could be done if you're somebody who follows Japanese racing at all. Sorry to not have any more information on that. We have another question related to time form. This one, all right, it's a little involved. I'm just going to read it the way it's written. And it's a little bit, it gets back to this misunderstanding about time form figs that we've talked about before. So I'll just read the question. If horse 1 has early pace figs of 120 and 118 from previous 2 races, and horse 2 has figures of 112 and 110 from his previous 2 races, in other words, lower, does that mean the one horse is more likely to be the speed, or am I oversimplifying? Now, this gets into this idea we've talked about before, where the numbers, the time form pace numbers that are embedded right now, the actual pace lines that are embedded in the PPs in Formulator and the ones you see in the time form PPs, these are not classic pace figures designed to do what this person is asking them to do. These are race shape numbers. The numbers you see there, everything is relative to the final number in the race. The only time form US number, you're going to want to use to determine who the speed is going to be relative to the other horses in this race is that speed number you're going to see currently on the preview page, where that sort of normalizes the scale for the horses in that race, and that will offer you a prediction of who's going to be first. That's what the pace projector uses, and if I were using time form pace figures to try to determine who was going to make the top, the preview page is the one I would use. I would use those other pace lines simply to upgrade or downgrade the figures earned in those races and to try to understand what happened in the shape of those individual races. This is a different way than I learned to make pace figures, which were more like what this question asker is asking. But, that's okay. The numbers are what they are. They provide a lot of good info. I love looking at them. If you want numbers to do it the other way, you're going to have to find them from another source than Timeform US. Anything to add to that one, JK?
Yeah. Colin Craig. I actually, okay, so I have an answer to this question, but I have a statement to your statement. I had the impression that the red and the blue indicators on those pace figures were in relation to the race shape and the overall figure. But I had the impression that a 120 was an indication of not velocity, but an indication of it was a rating of how fast that portion of the race was run, therefore insinuating that it could lead you in a direction of understanding who is faster at that portion of the race or not. I don't
think so.
Okay, so that's what we'll get Craig to clear that up, so one of us will stop making a mistake.
I know that's kind of bad. It does speak to our need to communicate this better. If you and I aren't agreeing about it, I think it depends. I think it depends. I don't think you're meant to use those A/B. I think the only ones you're meant to use A/B. Who's going to be faster in this race? The numbers on the preview page that are normalized. I think numbers in that running line, they probably correlate sometime, but I think there are situations especially depending on the distance of the race, where if one of them is sprint and one of them is a route, they're going to do no good in determining faster. But again, they're all relative to that final. It'd be a fun. I mean, I'm sure Craig could do it without my help, but maybe it'd be something to work on together. So follow up with him again. I'm pretty sure because that's how I described the last time I talked about it on the show, and Craig actually notes saying, yes, you got it right. That makes me think that gives me to say that I'm probably right about it, but we can check on that.
And then the point is that he asked is like, regardless of the situation, even if we're just using the preview number, when their figures are that close and not like someone who seems to really stand out, when you're trying to identify who's going to be at the speed of the speed, I think you have to go to post position.
Yes. And
you have to go to rider. If it's Kendrick or Paco on the horse that's doing the 112s, and it's Irad or Joel on the horse doing 120s, you can assume that the horse that's doing the 112s will probably make speed, and Irad and Joel could potentially take back. Not to pick on those guys, but they just happen to be more conservative riders than the other two. So I think
it's not always the wrong move.
Yeah, if it happens to be those two, those situations where it's really close, I would look to the rider and the post position to understand more about who is potentially in that situation.
We talk in the book about how, there are senders on every circuit, and if you want to get serious about improving your race design, which is really what we're talking about here, trying to see the race in your head before you run, you got to know who those senders are. Then there are riders who, are stereotypical, like proper grabbers. And then there, to me, Joel and Irad, they're in between, but against somebody like, you used great examples with Kendrick and Paco. What was the Jerry Bailey line? They'd rather be on the lead than be president. Against those guys, they're more likely to take a little bit of a hold and try to get in that classic John Velasquez stalking wide position that can very often, if it's the right pace scenario, be super productive. As horse players, we typically like the jockeys. Dirt racing, universal bias of dirt racing seems to be towards speed. So a lot of people who play the horses a lot, we develop prejudices in favor of those dead senders. But, depending on a brilliant ride in one scenario can be a terrible ride in another scenario. It depends on what else is in the race, and the jockey's ability the handicap is going to come into play too.
The POTUS capper might not like this, but I don't know. Kendrick and Paco might reconsider at the moment.
Oh, man, don't get me started. All right, we have a question speaking of troublemakers, we have a question from Garrett Skiba, who recalls that taking a bath at the Treasure Island, where the NHC is taking place, has been good luck for you, JK, in the past. Here's my question. Does that continue to be a go-to angle for the tournament? Would you recommend that other participants bathe as well?
Well, here's the thing. I just actually figured it out. I'm glad Garrett mentioned it. So here's the story with that. Back when my first NHC, the one that the two entries final table situation, at that time in the NTRA, they gave, if you were a double qualifier, they gave you a suite, like an upgraded room, not a suite, but like an upgraded room if you wanted one. But now they just give you an extra 4 nights if you want to bring a guest for a separate room where you can use them anytime throughout the year. When I was in the suite the first year, I had like a jacuzzi style tub with like jets, nothing like nice. It's still Treasure Island, right? So my bath took place in that situation. But then the last 2 years, I've just had to take bath in I take a bath in your typical Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express style shower with a tub in it. So I think that's been my downfall, and that's been the problem. So I don't know.
Find yourself a jacuzzi.
I think I'll probably run over to the Venetian on Friday morning. They have a wonderful spa over there. Oh, so I'll just jump in their jacuzzi. It needs jets is the answer. It needs jets. And yes, Gary Palmisano, I don't know if I could put bubble bath in it. If that's the bubbles that I need, maybe it's the bubbles, but I need some turbulence in the water in order to have my best performance.
Oh Lord, this is one of the great TMI moments in the history of the DRF Players podcast. Was there an actual bath photo? Was it like with the horses? Did you actually post that one year of the picture of you just out of the bath?
Oh, I didn't post it. I sent it to friends, and I'm sure I Snapchatted it to people. But no, I didn't. It didn't make it to Twitter. But maybe it will this year. Maybe that will be the difference.
I would think about it. The only thing that could have been worse, people, is if in the year that he got the 2 entries in the top 10 at the NHC, if the Visidero had somehow been involved. That's the only way this could be more obnoxious than it already is. So I apologize. I apologize for being involved. All right, let's see. There's a couple other questions here. No, everybody just wants us to answer POTUS Capper's questions, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that already.
I saw one that was pretty good. I don't know if you saw Adams. It says at Dodge Vader. I'm assuming that's what that is. But he said, if you were in control of the Pegasus Day, what changes would you make? Venue, distance, undercard, date. So I'll say a couple of things, and then I'll defer to one of the smartest people in racing I know. Is I guess I would run it at Santa Anita. It from a business standpoint, it feels as if it would be easier to do at Santa Anita. However, I do understand that Stronach and I don't know her title, but his daughter Belinda is very interested in kind of making that Miami party vibe at the event. I feel like you could still do that in California and LA with the LA vibe. I think the seating would be different. There's obviously, from a logistics standpoint, like I don't know how. I've never been to Pegasus. I don't know how they how do they block it off, because it's just an open. Gulfstream is just open. You just walk in wherever. So there's no gates per se. So I think maybe Santa Anita would be interesting. But to my point of deferring, is Paul Matisse actually wrote five points on Twitter of things that he would do differently. And it's too long to get into, but to answer your question, I'd go to his feed and look at the 5.
Can you retweet
that? There's 5 different tweets. So
I see. It's a whole thread. So what's his handle?
It's at Paul Matisse Jr. So PaulMattiesJr.
Check it out. You should be following Paul anyway. Got so many great ideas about different pieces of the game. Yeah, I kind of think it's cool that it's Florida, just because I feel like we're always going to have more big industry stuff going on in Southern California anyway. As for timing, it's never going to move. It's in a beautiful spot on the calendar because of the ability of horses to run in the event and still cycle down from training in time to participate in the breeding season. So I think that's logical. I feel like the 1 1/8 makes sense too, because we've already got sort of the championship level races going farther. Going shorter isn't a thing, as we've discussed. The mile 2-turn race doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I kind of feel good about the timing and the distance. How about you?
Yeah, no, I definitely with the timing. I think that has to be the same. Yes, the World Cup itself needs to be a 1 1/8. You're right about the Florida thing. It's a little bit awkward having a race called the Pegasus, and you can't look outside and see a $30 million statue of Pegasus smashing a dragon.
There's that.
But I think that it would be nice if we had more participation from horses that foreign horses. I think that would make it a little bit more exciting. I know we have Toast of New York coming this year, but
yeah, I was going to say you're getting what you asked for.
Well, I mean, the Dubai World Cup has horses from from all over the place, from Tokyo. I'm not from Tokyo, excuse me, from Hong Kong, from Europe, from everywhere. So Australia, that to me, that one's a little bit more dynamic. Obviously, where it's placed in the world is easier for those people to get to, but just an idea.
And also, like the cycle of training makes it much easier. It is, again, that idea that you can run in it and you don't miss the breeding season. It is interesting. It's an interesting idea for a Coolmore potentially to like take a shot to prove a certain runner could run on dirt the same way they do in the Breeders' Cup Classic, to be able to sort of transfer that idea or take a second shot with a different horse potentially in the Pegasus. It is interesting. Perhaps the buying the slot, the barrier to entry makes it a little bit less appealing, but it's something to think about, especially in some of these years. This presumably won't be a one-time thing where they're sort of scrambling a little bit to fill those last few stalls. I think that's an interesting idea, JK, for potential future exploration. Here's another one about record keeping. Oh, did you have one more thing on that?
No, I was kind of rereading Paul's thing. I really do encourage people to look at it. Essentially, just to give you a bit of a tease. It's just I didn't want to paraphrase and mess it up, but I feel like I can. It's 10 spots. They're franchises. It's a 5-year deal, so you buy a spot for 5 years, and then there's actually 6 races. There's the World Cup. There's a 1 1/8 turf race. There's a turf and dirt sprint. There's a filly and mare turf and dirt sprint. And so you take all that money, and there's like teams essentially. So if you're Coolmore, you have you run a horse in all of those events, and then the winner of all 6 of them is kind of like the winner of the whole situation. And there's jockeys that can only ride for one franchise, so for the whole weekend and the whole, it's a cool idea. He lays it out in more detail.
It sounds a little, out there in a good way. It's just obviously when I say out there, I mean out of the box. Which is obviously a good thing in a lot of cases, especially in a sport like racing where things can be a little staid. I'm going to read the whole thing, and who knows, maybe we'll have Paul on to chat about it at some point. Time for one more quick one about record keeping. What sort of stuff do you track in your record keeping, and how does it help you improve your game? That's a good one.
Yeah, well, I know that you talked a little bit about the tournament version of my record keeping. What I like to do there is, if I'm playing a lot of matchups, I want to know who I'm playing, so I can have an idea of who might have my number or whose number I might have. Also, I want to know which type of game I do well in. Do I do well in the 10% games? Do I do well in the high ratio games? All in formats or the live ones. So I want to know all of those things. I want to also know if playing with 1 or 2 entries, which one of mine is it worth it for me to play with 2? Conversely, and I think what people are really asking about is your tote play, your parimutuel play. I think one of the best things you can do, thank goodness for ADWs and technology, is understand which pools you excel in and which pools are money sucks for you, because every time you will look and you'll say, oh my gosh, I made all my money this year playing tries, but I bet exactas more than anything else. Or I made all my money betting exactas, but I can't stop myself from playing tries, supers, and pick 4s. Have an idea of what bet structure and pool you excel in, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can get from good record keeping.
Love it. Mike Maloney has a whole piece in the book on it. You might want to check that out. Also, I just was working on some excerpts that are going to be running in DRF soon from the Maloney book, and one of them was on this very issue of record keeping. So keep your eyes peeled for further advice on that. We are out of time, JK. Do you have a final thought for us?
Yeah, just the other thing I was going to say is another great point that Mike has made is identifying what meets and what times of the year you excel is another thing that you can figure out. I know you love playing Gulfstream, but maybe you're not good at it. So maybe you should spend your time and money elsewhere.
Those records will definitely help force you to be honest with yourself and have to help you become a better player. And a lot of people conveniently ignore them because they don't want to know. And if you can afford to do that, more power to you. But for those of us who are interested in improving as horse players and trying to turn this into as hard as it can be, into a net profitable enterprise, or at least lose less, record keeping is going to be an essential part of that puzzle. We had one that snuck in via DM, but we don't have time for it, so I'll get to that. We'll get to that one on Friday. I want to thank Jonathan Kinch. I want to thank everybody for sending in questions, especially those of you who did so at the last minute. Very, very helpful on a Tuesday afternoon where we didn't have all that much to deconstruct. On Friday's show, we're going to be going in-depth stakes races on the Pegasus card, and we're going to reserve, I'd say, at least 10, 15 minutes to talk about the Pegasus itself. That should be a ton of fun. I hope you will join us then. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.